welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. I am Dave Revson. Great to have you with us on this Thursday. As I mentioned, Rafael and Paul will both be by in just a bit to talk about the respective sports that they follow. But again, it is Final Four Thursday in volleyball. The Big Ten all over it, fully half of the field. That is our big story today. The games are in Tampa tonight. The Huskers are going to play first against Pitt. That is a matchup of number 1 seeds. And then the Badgers take on Texas. The Horns got through as a 2 seed after knocking off top seed Stanford in their regional final. The Big Ten Network's Emily Eman will have one of the best seats in the house. She joins us now to get us ready for tonight. And Emily, let's start with Nebraska and Pitt. This is a rematch of the semifinal from a couple of years ago that Nebraska won. We talked when we had you on yesterday about the relative youth of both of these teams. Can you take a whole lot from that matchup of 2 years ago that might apply tonight?
Yeah, look, that matchup was so different than what we're going to see tonight. These are two completely different teams. For Pitt, they only brought back their middle blocker and setter from that match. For Nebraska, it's just one of their outsides, Allie Batenhorst and Lexi Rodriguez. So, yes, it might be the two same teams matching up with a little bit of the same personnel. But look, these are two completely different teams with a lot of youth on the court. So it could be a completely different matchup than what we saw in 2021.
These are both really good defensive teams, as you were talking about yesterday. Statistically, you could argue they might be the two best defensive teams in the country. So what can sway the balance when you have two great defenses going head-to-head?
And when you have two great defenses, the question becomes who can outlast who. Both Nebraska and Pitt get it done in a little bit different ways. Nebraska really relies on that backcourt defense. They have the best libero in the country with Lexi Rodriguez. They really rely on her, Landon Showboy, one of the freshman defensive specialists for them, and everyone else kind of acts as other liberos when they're on that backcourt. So they really pressure the backcourt to get a lot of ups and transition that into offense. For Pitt, they get it done from a blocking standpoint. They are one of the best, if not the best, blocking team in the country, right under Wisconsin and Texas. So both are good defensively, but they get it done in different ways. So the question becomes, one, who can outlast each other, but then also the ability to put balls down in transition. So if Pitt's able to get those touches, then they transition them into offense. And Nebraska get good enough touches to really run their high-efficient offense.
It is pretty remarkable, though, the only two teams holding their opponents under 100 hitting percentage in this tourney. They've both been outstanding. Let's get into some of the individuals. And Merritt Beeson, we talk about that youth of Nebraska, but Merritt Beeson had the 2 years at Florida, transferred in, so a little bit of an elder stateswoman on this team. How important can she be for Nebraska in this one?
I mean, Merritt Beeson has been so important to this team this entire season, not just from an offensive production standpoint. Yeah, she leads the team in kills, but she's also that emotional leader and the captain for this team. Look, she came in January and right away was named the captain, which shows you just how good of a leader she is right off the bat. And for this young team that has no seniors, what she also does is just keep them composed. Yes, she can put down balls like no other, but also, you know, when things get tight or when they get rattled, she rattles everyone together and says, hey, we can do this. We have to just lean on our expertise, lean on that defense. And I think tonight's going to be really big for her because she's going to have to shut down some really good outsides on her side. So blocking-wise, she's going to have to be big. But she's been doing it all season long, so it'll be no surprise to see her get a few big stuffs up front.
Yeah, she's been tremendous, and then the kills, incredible too. Offensive player, 17 of the last 18 matches, she's had double digits. So Beeson will be really big. We've talked about Rodriguez. Who else are you focused on here for Nebraska?
Yeah, one of the keys to defeating Pitt is taking down one of their freshmen, the National Freshman of the Year, Olivia Babcock, who's one of their right sides. So I'm looking at two players. That's Harper Murray and Allie Batenhorst on the outside. They're going to have to do a good job tonight, not only setting up the block, but if that fast offense is running, they're going to have to make some big reads and close it. She runs most of their offense, Babcock does, for Pitt. So if Murray and Batenhorst can be really big up front, not only defensively, but then in transition, put some balls down, the two outsides for Nebraska are going to have to play really well tonight.
Well, this is a series that the Huskers have absolutely dominated. They are 13-0 all time against Pitt. If they can make it 14-0, they will be in the national title game for the 11th time. The other semi is Wisconsin and Texas. Now, the Horns are the defending national champions. So give people a little bit of an idea, maybe just a quick primer on Texas this year as compared to last year, and what we need to know about this team heading into the matchup with the Badgers?
Texas is also a completely different team than what we saw, win that national championship last season. They lost one of the best outsides of our generation, Logan Eggleston, who graduated last season. They also lost Zoe Fleck, who was probably one of, if not the best libero in the country last year. So it's a new Texas team. They also have some youth for them. They have a freshman setter, Ella Swindle, who's done a phenomenal job leading her team to a national semifinal. But what this team relies on is their blocking. They are one of the best blocking teams in the country. We talk about how good Wisconsin's block is all the time, but look, Texas is right up there with them. They're top 3 in the country in blocks per set. They rely on that front court defense. And then offensively, they have one of the best outsides in Maddie Skinner, who is not only able to put a good ball down in system, out of system, and out of the back row. She is stellar. So 2 things to watch for that team. It's going to be a good defensive battle up front. And then Wisconsin is going to have to key in on Skinner as well.
So if Texas is a great blocking team and Wisconsin is a great blocking team, if those two maybe offset one another, what other ways are there in which Wisconsin could win the game?
Yeah, one thing Texas can struggle with from time to time, and we've seen it even throughout this tournament, is passing. Wisconsin has to be good from the service line tonight. They've gotten so much better throughout the season, really testing their opponents, getting them out of system. We saw it during the Oregon match. Oregon is one of the best passing teams in the field, and they really handled them and got them out of system at a high clip. Wisconsin has to continue that aggressiveness from the service line, hitting their seams really well, because if Texas is out of system, it also takes one of the best middles in the country out of the play, which is Asia O'Neal. When she's involved in the offense, Texas is lethal. Wisconsin's number one key is really getting Texas out of system to disrupt that offense just a little bit more.
Let's dive into some of the individuals. Sarah Franklin is the Big Ten Player of the Year, so clearly she has an important cog here for Wisconsin. What does she mean in this match? In what ways could she impact it?
Yeah, I mean, she's a huge impact for Wisconsin on both sides of the ball. And what she showed during that Oregon match was it's not just her offense. Defensively, she's making highlight reel plays left and right. Tonight, though, she's going to have to be really good against 2 physical right side blockers in Molly Phillips, who's Texas' opposite, and then setter Ella Swindle, who's a 6'3" setter, so she's pretty physical. She's averaging about 0.8 blocks per set, so better than most setters are. But look, Sarah Franklin's so good. All the time she's going up and over the block anyway. What she needs to do especially well tonight is pass really well. She's going to be targeted in serve receive, and Wisconsin has to be in system in order to run that efficient offense that we've seen all year. So, yeah, she'll probably put up some of the same numbers we've seen her from an offensive standpoint, but it's really that defense and serve receive that she's going to have to step up big tonight.
Who else should we be watching for the Badgers?
Yeah, I think 2 players that are going to play a really key factor are Devin Robinson and Anna Smrek on the right side. Because Texas relies on outside Maddie Skinner, they're going to have to get a few more touches than other teams have in the tournament. She had 24 kills in the regional semifinal and then 26 following that up. So she's going to have a big night. She's going to get her kills. But at the end of the day, Smrek and Robinson have to be a factor up front blocking and try to at least touch her up and slow her down.
Emily, I'm going to get a little greedy here at the end. You've got 2 Big Ten teams, one in each semifinal. There's obviously the possibility of them meeting in the national championship as they did just a couple of years ago. How likely do you feel like that is? Like, are they both considered the favorite in your mind? How do they each stack up?
Yeah, both Wisconsin and Nebraska, to me, are definitely considered the favorite. You look at the Texas-Wisconsin game. Texas has proven from time to time that they can struggle in terms of passing and physicality. And Wisconsin doesn't have too many areas that they need to improve in. So for me, I would give Wisconsin the edge for sure. But look, the Nebraska-Pitt game, I think, is going to be an all-out battle. That's the one I'm really keeping my eye on. It could be a coin toss. You have 2 of the best defenses going at it in the country. Again, a question of who can outlast who. I still would give Nebraska the edge just because we've seen them rise to the occasion all season long with those freshmen stepping up, playing in front of 92,000 people, winning a top 5 non-conference game on the road, winning a 1 versus 2 undefeated matchup. This is just the next test for them to see, okay, can they rise to the occasion in a Final Four when they're dependent on? And I think they're going to continue to show us that they can.
Been an amazing year for both of them, and we hope we are talking tomorrow on Big Ten Today about that all Big Ten championship matchup. Emily Ehman, thanks for all of your insights on this. Feel like we are primed and ready to go to watch these matches tonight, thanks to you.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you.
Raphael just won hoops game in the Big Ten last night, and to say it did not go well would be an understatement. Number 25 Northwestern losing at home to Chicago State, 75-73. It marked Chicago State's first ever win against a Big Ten team. They've been 0-65 all time. In fact, it was their first ever win against a power conference team. Among their many issues, the Cats committed a season-high 14 turnovers. Raphael Davis is here, and look, there's no way to sugarcoat it. This is a brutal loss.
Yeah.
Now look, they've got some stuff to offset it on the resume, including the win over Purdue. You think about Iowa last year, they lost to Eastern Illinois at home. They overcame it and easily made the NCAA tournament. But, man, this was a really poor performance.
Just a bad loss overall, because you think about this team, you're finally ranked, your older guys start to feel good about themselves, and that's what it looked like. I've been in that position as a guy that's finished bottom of this league, as a guy that has some success. When you get ranked, you just start to feel good about yourselves, and they were relaxed in that first half. And you listen to Coach Collins in the press game conference, they weren't connected. They weren't connected on either end of the floor. Chicago State shoots at 48% from the field. They turned it over 14 times, which led to 17 points. They were -10 in transition. The guys just weren't connected. They just were feeling a little too good for themselves.
Missed a bunch of free throws,
Yep.
too, really critical ones. Just didn't make the plays that you would make. I think, to me, the part that really stands out is, does it point out bigger issues? Like, this is not as good a defensive team
Yep.
as it was a year ago. I think that's pretty clear. Chicago State went small, and Northwestern wasn't really able to counter it. So a lot of issues there. Again, does it disqualify you from making the dance? Of course not. I mean, again, Iowa made it comfortably last year, but does it show you that maybe the team isn't quite as good as we thought they were after they beat Purdue? To me, that's the bigger issue. Let's get into this weekend's action and some really compelling games on the Saturday slate. Penn State fresh off a win over Ohio State. They'll take on Georgia Tech at the Garden. Indiana hosting number 2 Kansas. Michigan State in desperate need of a win. They will battle Baylor in Detroit. Ohio State takes on future Big Ten member UCLA. And the biggest game of all is in Indy. Number 3 Purdue, number 1 Arizona. Let's start there. We touched on it just a little bit yesterday, but I want to talk about it kind of at greater length here. What stands out here? How do you see this one playing out?
I mean, it stands out because Arizona, they have the big guys. You think about Omar Ballo, the 7'2 freshman. They have the guys to compete size-wise with the Zach Edey, with the length at the rim. But I think this game is going to come down to the backcourt. Caleb Love, Braden Smith, you got Pele Larson, you got Lance Jones. Against Wisconsin, Larson and Caleb Love, they go for 40. They go 7 of 11 from the three-point line. They were the difference in the game. This is a game where Purdue's backcourt is going to have to simply guard their yard. It can't be a game like they go into Welsh Ryan or Northwestern's guards give them 72 points and Zach Edey gets 35, but you lose that game. This is a game where the guards have to take control on the perimeter on a defensive end and cut the water off because a guy like Caleb Love can get hot.
How much do you think this game's going to be about pace? I mean, Purdue tends to play at a somewhat slower pace.
Right.
Arizona really likes to get up and down the court. Do you see that as being a big factor? I mean, Purdue can play at that pace, but are they going to try, in your mind, to slow it down?
I think naturally it's going to slow down because Purdue runs sets in the half court, but I don't think Coach Painter is going to slow it down purposely because this season, that is one of Purdue's strengths that they didn't have last season, where they have guys that can get up and down the floor. Zach Edey gets a defensive rebound. He's looking for Braden Smith, and this season he's looking for Lance Jones. So now you have 2 ball handlers, whereas though last season, just Braden Smith with the ball in his hands. You don't want to wear him down getting in the transition game. But this year, they have the guys with some ball skills. And then off the bench, Cam Heide can compete in transition. Miles Jones can compete in transition. Caleb Furst is better athletically. So I think this year, this is one of the Purdue strengths, being able to play multiple fashions and beat you in different ways.
This is a great game.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the great thing about college basketball. You know, we don't get this as much on the football side at all because there's no incentive at all in football to play games like this. Every loss gets held against you. That's not the case in basketball. And, man, this should be incredible atmosphere in Indy. Purdue's only won 2 games ever against number 1. Did not realize that. And the last time they beat number 1 was Arizona, and it was back in 2000. So it has been a long time since Purdue has won a game against a team as good as the one that they will face on Saturday. So that'll be a great, that's the marquee game of the weekend. So not only will the number 1 team in the state of in college basketball be in the state of Indiana, the number 2 team will be there too, because Kansas is going to Assembly Hall to take on the Hoosiers. Indiana, again, it's been a little bit up and down here for them, but they have done a decent job here at home. They really handled Maryland at home. This is a tough team in Kansas, as we know. One that boasts Hunter Dickinson, maybe the highest profile transfer in the country. What do the Hoosiers need to do to pull off what for them would really be a huge win?
Their backcourt has to show up. I mean, they just have to. There's no way around it. You think about what's been IU's strength this season. It's been the inside game. It's been Khalil Ware. It's been Malik Renew. But now you have KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson walking through those doors, and those numbers may even out. But you got a guy like Kevin McClure for Kansas. That senior, 6'7", averaging 19 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, going up against the freshman in Mackenzie Mbako. He's going to have to bring his hard hat. It's going to be a struggle there for the freshman to kind of contain that guy. But then you got the point guard battle and DeJuan Harris and Gabe Cupps. If Gabe Cupps can contain DeJuan Harris, keep him in front, keep him out of the lane, stop him from throwing those alley-oops to the rims to the big fella, that's what's going to help Indiana. And their guards are just going to have to play well. They're going to have to score from perimeter.
And they're going to have to guard from the perimeter, too. I mean, they're not a great outside shooting team. And honestly, you look at it and say it's a hard way to win in college basketball because of how many teams shoot threes. But the truth of the matter is, if you look kind of game by game, they probably played the best in the games they've shot the fewest threes, or they've been able to get it inside. But you have to be able to guard the three in college basketball. And Indiana has struggled there, and Kansas is a really good outside shooting team.
And Kansas is a mature team. They played together for a while. They know how to move the basketball. Indiana's still young on the perimeter. You think of Gabe Cupps, you think of Mackenzie Mbako. They get lost in switches a bunch. They're pointing. They're not going with man. They're not going with their man. You go under a DeJuan Harris ball screen, it's going to be a dot in your eye, Gabe Cupps. So you got to stay connected, know the scouting report, know who to close out to, know how to close out to them. At Purdue, we used to have a Ray Allen closeout. You close out to a dead shooter. You're going to close out to Kevin McClure like you close out to a Kobe Bryant. He can do it all. And then you have your Rondo closeout. You close out short. But those things are scouting report, and younger guys don't always read their scouting report fully through.
Or aren't able to execute it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
They didn't execute the scouting report against Auburn. I gave up 104 points. So can you figure out a way to defend better? That's going to be critical there. And you know it'll be a great atmosphere.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know that if they can get it going a little bit, maybe that gives them the momentum against what is one of the better teams in the country. Kansas is really, really good. Michigan State is taking on an excellent Baylor team. You never want to say must win. I mean, there's so many games in college basketball that, and we've seen Tom Izzo teams get better and better as the year goes on. So I don't want to be here sounding the alarm.
Right.
He has such a great track record. However, it would be a really good idea to win this game.
Yes.
Rafael, just in terms of, you don't really have anything on that non-conference resume, and they've beaten Butler.
Right.
I don't think that's going to turn any heads on the selection committee. You win a game like this, you feel a little bit better about yourself. So what's it going to take here for Michigan State to win this game in Detroit?
And if I'm Coach Izzo, if I'm sitting in that locker room in the Breslin Center, I feel good about this game because this is a guards game. And you come into this season, people around the country, you talk about Michigan State, they could have had the best backcourt in the country this year. A.J. Hogarth, Tyson Walker, Jay Nakins. Well, this is a game where you can go out and you can prove it. You got Jacoby Walters, Ray J. Dennis, Langston Love. They're averaging 41 points a game right now. Each of those guys shoot it better from 38% from three. I mean, Baylor as a whole have 6 guys that play more than 13 minutes a game that shoot it better than 38% from three. But those 3 guys make them go. If Michigan State's guards and their perimeter can come out and have one of their better games as a collective this season, I could see it going Michigan State's way because whichever perimeter plays the best in this game, I think that team will win it.
And there have been struggles for Michigan State on that end. They have not shot the ball nearly as well as they did last year. And you still look at some of that stuff and you say it's cyclical. I do wonder, though, a little bit, and I'm really interested in your take on this, the fact that they can't manufacture points inside, does that make them easier to guard on the perimeter because you're just not concerned with sagging on the low post at all, and you can stay with their shooters?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you don't have a guy that you can throw the ball into and get an easy one or force a double team or force guys to rotate, it's harder on the perimeter, which is why you need a guy like an A.J. Hogarth to play downhill more. He can be a guy that can put pressure on the paint without necessarily posting up. He's settled for way too many jumpers this season. If he can get downhill, that causes rotations, that causes guys to help in, and then you get some of them kick-out threes, and then you play off of rotations. Those guards have got to attack more off the bounce. Jaden Akins, it can't just be Tyson Walker against Baylor. It's going to be a long day. And I expect A.J. Hogarth get downhill, get himself to the free throw line.
Michigan State trying to avoid falling to 4-6 on the season. Then you get some home games that certainly are winnable, although you look at that schedule, like Indiana State's really good,
yeah.
right? I don't know. You don't take anything for granted right now. But again, it would change the way that I'm thinking about Michigan State if they were able to win a game of this caliber against the Bears. Oh, Indiana basketball losing an all-time legend, George McGinnis, passing away early this morning. He had a heart attack at his home last week. The son of sharecroppers who moved to Indiana to find a better life, McGinnis was a high school legend in the state. He played 1 year for the Hoosiers in the era of freshman ineligibility, leading the conference in scoring and rebounding, had a brilliant pro career in the ABA and the NBA, and is enshrined in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. George McGinnis was 73 years old. Big Ten hockey is off to a typically solid start. 6 of the 7 teams ranking in the top 20 in the pairwise rankings, all in the top 26. That being said, Hockey East appears to have the edge right now as the top conference. They have 6 of the top 11 teams nationally. Our first visit of the year from Paul Caponigri.
He's been asking
studio.
for me all year, I swear.
I've been pounding the table.
I said, not yet, Dave, not yet.
We need to get Cappy in here. I mean, you've been in here, but you haven't been on this
over there.
This hallowed ground,
Correct.
this particular
Correct.
set. Okay, so big picture for those who haven't been paying attention, and shame on them.
Sure.
How good is the Big Ten this year?
The Big Ten is, from top to bottom, I think, as good as it's ever been. Maybe not as top-heavy as it was the last couple of years, especially with Minnesota and Michigan and just the amazing talent that a lot of is flourishing in the NHL now. But the league, I think, is as healthy as it's ever been, and it's a little more even, which is making it a little more exciting in the long run for who's going to finish first and the playoff scenarios and all that. But they're also going to be beating up on each other, which is going to make those standings that we just saw. You know, the records might not look sexy, but the teams are good.
So we have talked some hockey in the show. We had Mike Hastings on.
Former coach of mine.
Really? He lived to tell the tale? Where did he coach
I
you?
lived to tell it.
Yeah.
In Omaha, in juniors, 20 years ago.
How about that? Oddly, that didn't come up in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think I asked you, who are the best players you ever coached?
You didn't say
It
me?
was weird. Yeah, he didn't say. I'll have to go back and re-rack it. Maybe
next time.
Maybe I missed it. But that to me is an incredible story, right?
Yep.
I mean, we've been coming on here for a few years, and we talk about Wisconsin. It's never really
right.
We haven't been saying great things about them.
Not the way we should be.
No. Given the historical success of the program, I mean, to have had them at number 1 in the country as quickly as he did. Like, give us a sense again for those who maybe are just getting into this. What happened here? How did Mike Hastings turn this around so quickly?
You know, I think you can't put it on one thing. I think it does start with him, though. His the culture. I mean, you know, a lot of coaches do that, but his track record it speaks for himself at Minnesota State and what he did there. But now you have the resources of a University of Wisconsin, and maybe I thought it would take a little longer just to bring in players and whatnot. But they didn't. He did not come into an empty cupboard. And then he also brought in some players, you know, the transfer portal and all that. But I think the biggest thing is the culture that he brings, the demand of his players, but also he's got this sense of, you better respect me, but you're also going to enjoy him too at times.
He seemed incredibly likable. He came across as very likable.
He's very good at being both, being the stern father type, but also being kind of the funny friend and being personable. And I think he gains guys' respect really fast. And clearly it's shown for them to be able to do what they've done. And then you have to factor in their goaltender is in the top 4 in every major category, save percentage, wins, goals against. I talked to him this summer about it. He didn't really know what was going to happen. He gave Kyle McClellan the shot first because he's a senior. He's like, I'm going to give him it. And like with goaltending in hockey, it's like if you're successful, well, we're just going to keep going with you until you aren't successful. And he's been fantastic.
We'll talk a little bit more about him when we get to some of the individuals in the league. Michigan State's a really good story, too. And I feel like we started to see some signs of this last year, right? In Adam Nightingale's first year. But now his second year, this is a team right toward the top of the standings with the Badgers. So what's going on there?
What's going on is I think they're doing the same thing as they did last year, except for the talent level in the building is a lot higher. They brought in some really fantastic transfers. We'll talk about Isaac Howard, too. He's one of those guys. But he also brought in some freshmen that are elite talent, and that just hasn't been happening for Michigan State prior to Adam Nightingale coming in. You saw last year, he kind of set the tone. They had a successful year, I think, with the level of talent they had. You just saw, like, if he brings in, some blue-chip talent, I mean, this thing's going to take off. They have a guy, Artem Levshinov, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the NHL draft next year. Michigan State hasn't had that type of player in 20 years come in and do that. So I think it's coupled with how he's changed the program, and then you mix the talent. Because I don't care how good a coach you are, if you don't have the high-end talent, you're not going very far. And he's done that. And again, I think it's happening in all sports right now. Like, you can change things fast.
Yeah.
The rebuild isn't so much happening as much anymore with the transfer portal and the way things are happening and how guys leave early.
Right.
And sophomores now sometimes are looked at as seniors because they're the experienced guys.
Talking about a program that has never won the Big Ten regular season or the conference tournament, and they're right up there in the standings. Let's take a look at those standings, and there they are. Michigan State, even with Wisconsin 24 points apiece. A Wisconsin team hasn't been to the Frozen Four since 2010. So those are both really good stories. And then you see the teams we've been talking about these last couple of years. Minnesota with 17 points, Michigan with 11 points. So those teams maybe have fallen off a little bit. And let's get into that. And I don't think, again, like, I follow this enough to know, like, Minnesota lost a lot of star power, right? When you lose really good players, sometimes you take a step back. I know that's kind of a universal truism, but tell me kind of where Minnesota is and who they have to replace. A ton of great players they lost to the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, 5 players, and not just 5 guys that are getting little tastes in it. I mean, they lost 5 stars. Brock Faber is, and you talked to him last year.
Yeah, it's great.
He's maybe the best defenseman on the Minnesota Wild now as a first-year player. So, and he was their captain. He kind of had that locker room. He was their, heartbeat, so to speak. So you lose players like that. Yes, they have a ton of talent right now still. I just think and they're young. So when there's that, there's a little more of a roller coaster ride of consistency. And I think they're a team that can, at the end, be where they were last year. You don't know. You're not as sure because last year's team was so good that they could play like a C- game and still somehow eke out a win. They can't do that this year, at least the first half. I think, with hockey, it's crazy how they get like these long breaks at Christmas time. Michigan doesn't play for 40 days in the middle of their season.
Yeah,
but it does give a chance for those freshmen or other guys to you come back and it's almost like a new season. And you almost treat it like you're a sophomore now. You're experienced. You know what you're coming into. And I think that's going to benefit Minnesota with some of the guys that were young last year playing 10 or 12 minutes. Now they're playing 20. Now they kind of know what's going to be expected of them in the second half and be a little more prepared.
You mentioned Michigan in there, too, and Michigan, similar story. I mean, there were this has been a loaded team.
Obi Baker, Adam Fantilli.
We've talked about for years here. It seems like injuries have been a part of their story as well so far.
Yeah, they lost their top player. Rucker McGorty got a rib injury. Ethan Edwards hasn't played, another defenseman that is – I think they put them at maybe the best 5 in the country when you go from 1 through 5 on a team, if you can have him healthy. They lost Jackson Hallam for the season, but those other 2 guys, if they come back, they've got the talent. They lost guys, but they always bring them in. They brought a couple transfer portal guys in. Their goaltender, Jake Parchevsky, has been pretty good. It's just if they stay healthy, I still think they're going to make a run. I think they look at almost like a challenge. Like they're almost not bored, but like, okay, people are starting to doubt us.
Right.
We'll see about that. And I just think
Talk to me in March, right?
Yeah, as long as they can stay quote unquote healthy, they've got the talent and they're going to be there in the end.
Have not won back-to-back games since late October, so it's been a while since they've really put a consistent effort together. I do want to talk about Penn State and Notre Dame. I look, there's a long way to go, right?
Again.
But you look at those pairwise and you say, okay, like they're going to be on the cusp of making it to the tourney if form holds here.
Sure.
What do each one of them need to do going forward?
Well, Penn State, it's kind of funny. Like, you thought scoring would be down this year, and they were trying to do things with defense and goaltending. And the funny thing has happened, it's kind of flipped. They've had some freshmen come in. Aiden Fink's got the most points of any player in the Big Ten with 23 as a freshman. I think they thought he'd be good, but he's exceeding expectations. Where they've struggled is in net, where I think they thought was going to be one of their strengths. Liam Soulier has struggled. Then they've kind of flipped between him and sophomore Noah Grannon, and neither of them have kind of, quote-unquote, won the net over. And they've just struggled with consistency there. And if you don't get good goaltending, you're not going to be able to make it. And then with Notre Dame, they've gotten the two guys they expected a lot from. Brian Bischel, Big Ten Goalie of the Year. He's been fantastic. And Landon Slaggert, a senior that decided to come back, play his senior. He's top 5 in the league in goals, in the country, excuse me. And so with them, another team, they're 500. They seem to win it. They beat BU's a top 5 team. Then the next night they lost 7-1 to them. Right. So like their consistency, they've got some nice young players. Another team like Minnesota that if those guys can kind of take that step in the second half, they can't go 500 in the second half. You got to go make 2 to 4 games at least over, and then you probably got to do well in the tournament. But that's the world we're in at the Big Ten, and it's going to be hard because you're playing all those top 20 teams you just saw on that.
Right.
There's not many, we can take a break off. We're going to get 2 in a row. So it's going to be tough for them, but, they both got talent to do it. It's just a matter if they can flip it on right at the right time.
We mentioned a lot of that individual talent. We'll talk about it later in the show. Some players that have stood out so far this season in Big Ten hockey. Rafael is back with me. Let's run through a few of those games. I find Penn State really intriguing. I mean, coming off the huge come-from-behind win over Ohio State, they go to the Garden. They'll have a lot of fans there taking on Georgia Tech. Damon Stoudemire, first-year coach there. Georgia Tech's got some good wins under their belt. They beat Duke, which is pretty impressive. They've lost some games maybe they shouldn't have lost. They've been inconsistent. I think we could probably say the same of Penn State. What are you looking at as you pair these teams off against one another?
You look at that Ohio State game, and Penn State could have quit at halftime. They were down 15, but they ended up coming back in that second half, plus 15, win that game by 3. And in that second half, we really got to see the combination of Kanye Clary and Ace Baldwin and why Coach Rhodes thinks it will work. I mean, they combined for 22 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and then what they did on the defensive end to Roddy Gale, Bruce Thornton, caused them to go 4-13 from the field. That's the backcourt that Coach Rhodes hoped to have at Penn State. And then they found some magic in a couple guys, in a DeMarco Dunn, a guy that's only averaging 13 minutes a game. He gets 12 points in the second half, 16 for the game. He was big time. And then O'Boyle was big time. O'Boyle was a guy that only made 4 threes on the season. So they're not even closing out to him.
He made 4 in this game, right?
And then he makes 4 or 5 in this game. So he was big time off the bench. Another guy that was playing in limited minutes. So now Coach Rhodes has more guys that he trusts, and it should be going good for him.
5 players in double figures in that game. And I do think, and we had him on earlier this week, and you talk about cobbling together a roster, which he had to do. I mean, he had no players, right? Like he literally got there and he had 3 guys. It's just hard. It's hard to kind of get that instant chemistry, but I know he feels good about the team he has. I think that's a really good test. Like these are 2 teams, first-year coaches, trying to figure out where they stand. They both have some moments they feel really good about. That should be a high-level game here on the Big Ten Network. So Penn State taking some momentum into that one. Michigan has some momentum too. I had a chance to see them. They went into Iowa, played a fabulous second half and knocking off the Hawkeyes. Now they get Eastern Michigan, a team that at least on paper one would think they should handle. No Amani Bates, obviously, after he was there last year, not there this year for Eastern Michigan. What do you think of where Michigan is coming off that Iowa win?
They found a way to win without Doug McDaniel being the star of the game. Doug McDaniel gets him 11 points on 12 field goals, and he didn't have it going until late in that second half, but they still found a way. And I think a big reason because they got their big fella going. Terrace Reed had one of his best games of his career, 19 points, 7 to 10 from the field, and he was just aggressive on the block, aggressive on the offensive glass. He needs to be that imposing force going forward this season, but especially Saturday against an undersized Eastern Michigan team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of as I got ready for that game, it felt to me like Reed's strengths were on the defensive end, and as you watch him on tape, I think he's a huge difference maker there.
Yep.
He's mobile, he can block shots, he takes up some space. But the offensive game was just a revelation.
Right.
I mean, in the free throw shooting, he's been a dreadful free throw shooter.
Yes.
And he goes out there and he's perfect form. He's Steph Curry-like at the free throw line. So that was a huge revelation, no doubt about it. But just in general, I think, to get that shot in the arm, they're going down, they're taking on Florida and Charlotte in the jump man. They had lost 5 of 6. And, you just kind of wondered with everything going on, with Juwan Howard not being on the bench, the head coach, just a lot of it felt like they needed something like that, and they got it. And I just wonder whether that'll be the shot in the arm they need.
No, I agree, especially when you can go on a road in the Big Ten and get a road win. There's nothing more valuable in this league than going out on a road and getting a road win against a good quality veteran team. It shows you who you are, especially when you have other guys step up, like a Terrace Reed, like a Will Shetter, who over the last 2 games is averaging close to 14 points a game. He's been big time. He was big time against Indiana with 17, big time in a road win. So you have these unsung guys step up. They build some confidence going forward throughout the rest of the season. But I love what Terrace Reed said after the game, and a lot of young fellas need to listen to him. He had this game offensively because he bought in what the coaches were telling him to do defensively. He used his energy and what he could do defensively on that end to just translate into the offense. He uses defense to go to offense. And so many times, especially big guys or guards even, if you miss some shots, if you don't get the ball on the block, you don't play as hard on the defensive end. So it's refreshing to hear him say, I want to give my all on this end, and now my guys are throwing it to me a little bit, and I'm scoring it.
I want to see how the Buckeyes bounce back.
Yeah, for
they
sure.
are heading to Atlanta. They're going to take on UCLA, obviously a future Big Ten team.
Yep.
As positive as that game was down the stretch for Penn State, I think from Ohio State's point of view, it makes you scratch your head a little bit, particularly on the defensive end. What are you watching here for the Buckeyes against a Bruins team that lost a ton of talent off of last year and is still kind of trying to find its way a little bit?
They just let their foot off the gas in that second half. They're still a young team, although we talk about how they're experienced this season. You get up by a bunch of points at halftime. You're on the road. The arena at Penn State is dead in there. And they didn't come out in that first 5 minutes of that second half, and they didn't put their foot on the gas and attack Penn State. They let them creep back into the game and make it one. So I think this game is a bounce-back game on a defensive end, but also offensively down the stretch. They've got to know which guys are taking which shots. Get better shots down the stretch, set guys up better, and then I think this will be a game where Zed Key is going to have to bring his hard hat because UCLA and their big fella in Bona, he battles down there on the block. So Zed Key, Felix Akpara, this is going to be a game where they have to produce. But when you look at Ohio State, I still think it's a 3-headed monster. Jamison Battle, Roddy Gale, and then you got a Bruce Thornton. They didn't have their best second half from the field, and you can't have a game where all 3 of those guys struggle from the field and expect to win close ones.
And it's going to be hard against UCLA because we know how good they are defensively. This is kind of Mick Cronin's specialty. Ohio State, I think 6 straight games now in the 80s. You're going to be hard-pressed to score in the 80s against UCLA. So each one of these possessions is going to count, particularly because UCLA just lost a ton of star power off of last year. I mean, you think about that team and Amari Bailey and Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell. Those guys are all gone, right? So they need this game to be in the 60s. Ohio State will want to play a little bit higher pace. Should be fun. 13th all-time meeting in what will be a Big Ten game a year from now, right?
Cool, man.
This will just be Wednesday night in February.
That's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a ton of fun. I can't wait. It is time for our Big Stat. It's presented by Walgreens. We were talking earlier about the huge jump made by Wisconsin hockey. Part of it is the play of transfer Kyle McClellan between the pipes. He came from Mercyhurst. He's 3rd in the nation in goals against average, well under 2 per game. Paul is back with me, and we're going to talk some individual standouts as promised. And you kind of hinted at McClellan earlier, but it's as good a place as any to start. Give us some insight into what he's meant for the Badgers.
I mean, I think, I'd say next to quarterback in football, it's the most important position in sports. You kind of go as your goalie does, and you saw those numbers, and he's third, but you also saw he's played a lot more than those other 2 guys above him. So if you look at in terms of, he's played most games and has the best numbers of anyone that's played 16 or more games. So he's just really been remarkable, and just a steadying force for Mike Hastings and making him look even more magical than he has. So
how good was he at Mercyhurst? I was kind of looking at some of the numbers.
His second year, he had a .932 save percentage, which is fantastic. And he did play 20 games, but the competition level there is just not, they'll play a Wisconsin in non-conference, but they're not, the majority of their games, you're not seeing the top level talent. So you're always, when you get transfers like Jake Barchevsky at Michigan is from Canisius. So and he's been good. You just didn't know how it would translate coming to the Big Ten and playing at the top level.
Interesting. And he talked a lot about his diet, that he's changed his diet significantly and feels a lot.
And he's just growing up. He's an older guy. I think he's just more mature. You know how to prepare yourself.
Another transfer off to a great start, Isaac Howard at Michigan State.
Yeah, he's dynamic. I think that was the thing. And you talk about getting star power. He's a first-round draft pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Michigan State hasn't had a first-round draft pick in a long time. A guy I played against, A.J. Thielen, was drafted in the first round in 2004.
That's the last one.
I'm pretty sure on that.
Wow.
I went back and looked.
Wow.
They've had a couple good. Jimmy Slater, another guy played, but we're talking about 20 years ago.
That's a long time ago,
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
You brought it up, not me.
I did. But no, he's a dynamic forward, and they have other guys. Red Savage has been, but he brings speed. He brings a little where defense is backing up because he's a really fast skater, scoring goals like he was expected to do. He's already gotten more points this year in half the games he played last year as a freshman.
We talked about the lost star power at Minnesota, but there's still some really good players there. Who do you have your eye on there?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Snuggerud's back from that top line. Yes, Matthew Nyes is gone and Cooley's gone, which has kind of slowed his numbers down a little. He still has 11 goals at Christmas break. So if you expound that to the second half, he's going to get about the same. He had 21 last year. He could get 20 again. It's just not getting as many points because he doesn't have as much help. But if he plays, elevates more, Minnesota can beat because they need that consistent force. And Rhett Pitlick is the other guy. 7 straight games with a goal. He's a guy, he scored the highlight reel goal of the year last year against Michigan. But there were times where you'd watch a game and you're like, where's 77? You can't find him.
Yeah.
This year he's been a lot more consistent. He's a junior. Just like most guys, it's like you're more consistent the more you've been there. Those 2 guys can kind of keep at that pace, maybe elevate it more. I like Minnesota's chances. In the
2 of the top 5 goal scorers in the Big Ten together there for the Gophers. And finally, what about Michigan? I know you have a duo that's caught your eye there too.
Yeah, and I mentioned Rutger McGroarty because he's been injured. He hurt his ribs. He's been out the last 5, and you can see it's hurt them. I mean, he was their leading scorer at the time. And when you lose your top guy, it's just going to deflate you a little bit. And he was also kind of their leader. It's kind of weird to say that as a sophomore, but he's been really good for them. He should be back. He might play in the World Juniors. He's a 19-year-old. He can go over and play in that tournament. If it is, then obviously full go. And then Seamus Casey, you lose Luke Hughes, that dynamic. He was kind of hidden under him last year. Now he's the guy, and he's been fantastic. He's top 5 in assists in the country. He's leading them from the back end. I mentioned they have 5 studs back there. He's the elite guy. If he can keep that pace, stay healthy. I mean, cross your fingers on all these guys because the game's so fast now, anything can happen.
We talk a lot about how long this season is. I mean, it starts in October. It doesn't end until April.
It starts before basketball and ends the week after basketball.
Ends after basketball. Yeah. But you mentioned it earlier, and I think it is important for people who maybe don't follow it as closely.
Sure.
Explain the schedule right now because there is this massive gap in the schedule.
Yeah, and not everyone has the same. The most massive schedule break is Michigan. They have 41 days. Now, Wisconsin's at like 17 or 18 because they play a holiday tournament right after. But Michigan has done this because of that World Junior Tournament. They lose 3 or 4 of their top players at that every year. So they're scheduling around that so that they're not missing players. Because when you look at that pairwise, it's computers. They don't put in, you guys lost to so-and-so because you didn't have these 4 players. It's like you lost because you lost. So I think they've worked that way And it can be an interesting thing. They have an easy non-conference weekend when they come back, but then their next 4 are home and home with Michigan State and then Wisconsin. So they're going to be right back into it after. So I do like how they do it to avoid the kind of losing games where they shouldn't lose.
Yeah. All right, well, good stuff. Great to have you back. We look forward to more regular visits here.
You got it, Dave.
As we get into
Always
it.
fun to be here.
Thanks to Paul. Thanks to Rafael Davis. Thanks to Emily Eman. We will see you tomorrow on Big Ten Today.